It's time to get nerdy, y'all.
A little bit of gaming history for you.
Something relevant in gaming and discuss our opinions on it.
Should we kick it out of here, or should we kick-start it?
This is the part where you, the listeners, try to stump the hosts.
I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on a podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, lads and lasses of all ages, welcome to the show. It is Tuesday, March 5th, 2024, and it is time to get nerdy. Welcome to episode 299 of Two Nerds in a Pod, the nerdiest gaming podcast in the multiverse. I am Maction, and I am joined by my friend, my bestie, the first option, the best option, Mr. Lam Galuka, also known as Mr. Nice Guy 425, a stand-up comedian, a stand-up guy. And for the next hour, the two of us, we're going to talk about video games in all of its various incarnations, all the way from news to trivia, history, and lawsuits, and everything in between. But first, as we always try and open the show, Mr. Nice Guy, it has been a week since we've had a chance to hang, being on opposite sides of the country as we are. How the heck are you?
Dude, I am doing fantastic and had a really good weekend for two reasons. Number one, went on an awesome camping trip with my two oldest sons up near a place called, I believe it's pronounced Mothy Lake here in Wisconsin. And went up there with a couple other families and just had a really good time. Did the campfire thing, did the marshmallow thing, did the toasted Twinkies thing, which, have you ever done that, Mac? Have you ever toasted Twinkies over the campfire?
I've never done toasted Twinkies. Tell me about it.
So apparently no one else up there had other than my family either. And so we have these little camp sticks that you get for like $2-3 at Walmart, but they're pretty sturdy. And if you just put them in a Twinkie, roast it over the campfire, you heat up the Twinkie, it gets even more golden brown than it already was right out of the plastic. That creamy filling gets to the point that it probably could burn the roof of your mouth if you're not careful, and it's just a joyous thing. So I'm sitting there, and I'm frying a Twinkie over the fire, and one of the other kids there is like, "What is that?" I'm like, "It's a Twinkie. Come on, you have to know what Twinkies are." And they were like, "Yeah, but I've never had one over the fire." I was like, "Well, prepare to have your mind blown." And so I'm there. I'm Santa Claus in the middle of March, or in the beginning of March, handing out Twinkies to the kids of Wisconsin. And everyone enjoyed their first Twinkie over the fire, and that was fun.
Amazing. I have never even heard of this, Mr. Nice Guy. Is this like a Pacific Northwest thing that I've not yet been inducted to?
I don't know where I heard about it. I know I heard about it from my wife, and she heard about it from someone else.
Okay.
So we do that. Sometimes we do starbursts over the fire on those little metal sticks, and they're really good. Now, highlight of the trip, I would say, Mac, is the lake up there was frozen over. And so there were people out there ice fishing. So I got some dope pictures of me and my sons walking on the lake, like way out onto the lake and just having a good time on the ice. And it was just creating memories, and it was fun. We had a good time. How about you, my man? What is new with you?
Wow, well, I've had none of that excitement and interestingness. Over here on the West Coast, there were some cold temperatures that, meant that I basically spent the whole weekend kind of inside. I had these big plans, these grand designs to replace, like, a body panel on the car that had gotten, like, rusted, so I got a replacement one, and the plan was, paint it all and do this whole thing to see how good we could make the rattle can work. It was going to be a whole weekend thing, and instead we just stayed inside and watched movies and played games, and
that's the best.
So the weather outside was frightful, and we do have a fire, so it was very delightful, but it is lousy Smarch weather for sure.
Dude, we both made Christmas references in our weekend stories, which was not scripted. But I think it's great that it happened. Other reason the weekend was good was related to a new game I've been playing, but we'll talk about that later. Mac, I say we do what we do best and hop right up in that gaming news, my friend. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. I have been a bit out of the loop, Mr. Nice Guy. I could use a crash course in what happened this last week.
Well, you're in luck, Mac. Welcome to episode number 299 of Two Nerds in a Pod. Welcome everybody who is here live in the chat. I see some Twinkie comments. I see some Starburst comments. Well, now it's time for some gaming comments. And Mac, the industry of gaming, the landscape of gaming is changing, and it's changing so rapidly. I have two news stories about that I want to share with you today. First one is on GameSpot.com, written by Darren Bonthuyes, I believe that's how this is pronounced. Here's what he writes. The physical edition of Baldur's Gate 3 is headed to Xbox Series X soon, but it's going to be an adventure spread out over not one, not two, this is me improvising, not three, but 4 discs, Mac. Larian's director of publishing, Michael Dowse, confirmed online that the studio almost managed to squeeze the adventure into 3 discs, but at the end of the day, it was 500 megabytes over the 3-disc limit. Larian could have cut some content from this physical release, but decided to instead place it on a 4th disc. In current and last-gen cycles, multiple disc releases have been almost unheard of, thanks to the vastly superior storage capacity of Blu-ray discs and improved compression technologies, with Final Fantasy VII's Rebirth physical release being an exception to the physical media norm. 4 discs is a lot, and it echoes the release of the first Baldur's Gate game, which launched on 5 CD-ROMs back in 1998. Mac, my question for you and my question for the chat is this. Is the size of games going to be the biggest contributor to us going digital, rather than the convenience, rather than the cost, although those kind of go hand in hand, rather than things like the PlayStation Portal that allow you to play games remotely and not wanting to switch discs? Like, and I have follow-up questions too, but like 4 discs, where are we going? Is physical media dead?
What I can tell you is what I know of how discs used to work in, say, the PlayStation days. Like, historically, one of the reasons why you had so many discs is that on the disc, any bit of data, any information that was going to need to be addressable was also going to have to be on disc 2 and disc 3. In addition to the cutscene specifics that you knew you were going to need.
Yep.
We're never going to need that dancing scene from Final Fantasy VIII on disc 2, so we can cut that and we can replace it with other stuff. But we obviously need all of the world data in any place that we can go and revisit. And I think some of those earlier games would do a thing where they would close off a town.
Sure.
So that they could save that data and add the new stuff and everything on. And I could see that situation where it's they could have fit it on fewer discs if you didn't have to do that. And so all that is to say that I think I agree with where you were leading there, Mr. Nice Guy, on on the move over to digital without the other things being a movement of necessity because of, what sorts of constraints you have. As sizes continue larger and we don't have more space to put it on optical discs, we're just going to have to go strictly to the digital only and strictly to that, just because, unless they want to start sending out, flash drives to plug in, that'll be, other removable media.
Here's the thing, and Ishmobile in the chat already kind of alluded to this, because I was going to ask this question. He says, yeah, the original Baldur's Gate, you had to switch discs in and out based on where you went on the map. There might have been an install all option if you were a baller with a huge drive. Now, that was going to be my next question, is this is not a linear game. And I've played plenty of multi-disc games where, you get to level 5 and, now you put in disc 2, right? Or disc 3 or whatever it may be. But with an open world game like Baldur's Gate, I'm super curious how that's going to work. As players explore the world, is it going to say, hey, you're on disc 4, put disc 2 in? That's just not going to be a fun way to play a game.
Well, and that's kind of how it used to work in the earlier days of the, disc-based games. Back before they kind of figured out that thing of duplicating the data so that you always had what you needed on the disc. You know me, Mr. Nice Guy. I'm a big fan of the physical for the more permanence that tends to offer on video games.
Sure.
But I mean, which, of course, it's no guarantee, not by a long shot, but it does seem to help a little bit. And so,
Yeah.
from a sheer practical standpoint, how do you hold back that giant boulder that is install sizes, and then the day one patch that is a full 10 gigabytes larger than the original game file itself?
Well, so there, I mean, it's wild to think about. And then additionally, we always want to think about the physical sale of this stuff and potentially the resale of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that GameStop is really going to want to deal with 4-disc trade-ins, where you got to make sure, okay, now is this person actually giving me disc 1, disc 2, disc 3, and disc 4? Are they all in good condition? Now I've got to store these separately, and when someone buys it, I've got to bring them out. Like, it's just too much of a hassle. And I feel like game sizes are going to make it more and more prevalent for people to just want to go digital, in addition to the convenience factor. Additionally, I honestly believe that if you're going digital on a 4-disc game, that publishers may start to offer some type of discount. I mean, it's not unreasonable to think that if they're charging $70 for Tears of the Kingdom, not based on how hard it is to make that cartridge, but based on the size and the quality of the game, that they're not charging $100 for a 4-disc version of Baldur's Gate 3, and saying, hey, if you want to buy it digital, we'll charge you the $70 that we charged everyone else. I just think that it's an interesting landscape, and it'll be crazy to see which direction we go.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. Well, hey, this is kind of the theme for today's show. And someone says we need a Blu-ray successor, and I think that really may be the case. We just need a way to store games on bigger hardware, bigger software that's disc-based, I guess is the word I'm looking for.
I wonder what on earth we would transition to. Another type of a format for storing video games. Absolutely.
Lots and lots of interesting comments in the chat. We don't have time to get to all of them, but we appreciate y'all and your thoughts. And concerning 8K gaming, that's something I look forward to. They just got to make those 8K monitors affordable. They're crazy right now. Moving on to the next news story, and we just have 2 this week. This one is on GameInformer.com by Wesley LeBlanc. Here's what he writes. Dragon's Dogma 2 hits PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC on March 22nd, and when you boot it up for the first time, you might learn it only has one save file. The Gamer reported on the news after an IGN Japan preview from earlier this year revealed console players will be stuck with just one single save file, making things like reverting to old saves all but impossible. He writes, after playing the game myself for about 3 hours, I could definitely feel a friction with just one save file, but it's one I came to appreciate. Yes, Dragon's Dogma 2 is hard, extremely so in some ways. Dying can set you back some, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't want for the ability to revert saves after saving right in front of a tough monster, for example. But it's clear Capcom has a vision with its difficulty in single save file. It makes your every action that much more impactful. So, on the one hand, we have discs or games that are 4 discs in size that are coming, right? Going back to the old days, but games are bigger. On the other hand, we're limiting the amount of space that gamers can have to save. And I won't even say it that way because this is not a size issue, so it's not really related. Mm-hmm. But it's just interesting to think that game companies are now only going to allow you to have one save in challengingly difficult games. Mac, what do you think, man? Like, I remember old Game Boy games, 3 saves minimum, 3 save files.
Well, I don't think that this is the beginning of a new era where we have limited saves, although I can, the beginning of a repeat of a limited saves in the Resident Evil games. I think this is something we've flirted with and played with a lot in a survival horror setting.
That's a really good point.
And I think it can be very useful for cranking up the themes and putting the tension. I don't know really anything about Dragon's Dogma, the game that they're talking about. I don't even know what genre it is, for that matter. But would you say it's kind of like a survival horror? Is this what we're doing?
No, it's not a survival horror. It's I would almost even compare it to a Monster Hunter, but without any online multiplayer.
Interesting.
So it's more action RPG.
Yeah, I would not have expected an action RPG game or any game that had RPG elements to the forefront to be the type of game that would limit you to one save.
And I should add some clarification. You know, I used the analogy of there being 3 saves minimum on Game Boy games. That may still be the case here. But what we're referring to is if you have a save file, you can't then say, oh, I'm going to save here and keep going and then have like 100 different incremental save files, almost like save states, like you can do in some of the Fallout games, and say, okay, I'm going to save before I go in this monster.
Yeah.
I'm going to save before I use this item. And then if I don't like the outcome, I'm going to go back to my save. That's what they're trying to avoid. I feel like this could have been accomplished simply by having a difficulty level that allowed for either permadeath or one save. I don't think that game makers need to necessarily cater to those who want an easy mode, but I do think that having one save is a strange way of cranking up the difficulty.
I'm going to take the opposite on a comment you just made, Mr. Nice
Okay.
Guy. And I'm going to say I do think video game developers should cater to people who want an easy mode. For some people, difficulty can keep them from experiencing, what there is in a game. I don't think it hurts that much to have assist modes like Celeste does, or to have options for you to play through on an easier difficulty. And I totally think more game makers should avail themselves of those things, just because I think it opens up your artwork to be appreciated more.
I could not disagree with you more. And to be clear, I'm not talking about accessibility. I'm talking strictly about difficulty. And there are some games that are meant to be difficult. On Elden Ring, right? It's a game that's meant to be difficult. A lot of these Souls-like games are meant to be difficult. And yeah, someone else just said it in the chat. So here's what this person says. They say, disagree. If games are art, the creators should make their piece with no input from the audience whatsoever. Da Vinci painted the Mona Lisa with a smirk. Take it or leave it. Souls games are difficult. Take it or leave it. I agree. 100%. He said it better than I could.
Okay. I agree to disagree.
To each their own.
Yeah.
That's fair. And that has been our news for the week.
All right, well, now let's go from looking around us, what's going on right now, to a little look into the past with some video game history. And this last week was a fantastic week for video gaming, Mr. Nice Guy. Just 2 really cool, awesome things, at least awesome things in my opinion. One, in 2010, for the Nintendo Wii, the release of Mega Man 10. Rounding out the classic Mega Man series to 10 titles. We would, several years later, see Mega Man 11 that had definitely a slightly different vibe as it moved away from the 8-bit style. But Mega Man 10 had a lot of really cool and fun things that it incorporated. Now, I know Mega Man is my series, Mr. Nice Guy, but I don't think you wound up playing any of the 9 or 10, did you?
What are you talking about, man? I've played every Mega Man game. I haven't beaten every Mega Man game, but I've definitely played those. They were on the Wii.
Yeah. How did you like 10?
I enjoyed them. I mean, I'm not as much of a purist as you. Like, I still think that Mega Man X is a phenomenal game. So, once again, that's an area where we agree to disagree. But I thought 9 and 10 were just fine.
Oh, no, I think X is fantastic. I love it for what it is. The classic series is just
That's
my
cool.
jam.
Yeah, no, and I thought 9 and 10 were great. It was cool to see something that we probably never thought we'd see.
Right?
Having grown up and playing those old Mega Man games and then being like, hey, guess what? We're going to make another one. And it gives me hope that they could do the same thing for other retro series that I enjoy.
Yeah, especially when we had Mega Man 7 and Mega Man 8 that were such a departure.
Sure.
They clearly moved that classic series in a different thing, and then just a return to form that was so great. The one other thing that I wanted to talk about, and this is a bit of a stretch, Mr. Nice Guy,
Okay.
is the second amended complaint in Connectix v. Sony was filed in 1999. Again, a bit of a stretch because, this will be important later. It's a simpler time, Mr. Nice Guy.
Yeah.
The real deal with Connectix v. Sony. The year is 1998 and the DMCA had just been passed, complete with its anti-circumvention clauses, which probably won't become important later on. But there were some kids with a dream. They were like, why can't we play PlayStation games on our Macintosh computers? Because yes, the first thing that Connectix made was for the Macintosh computers, and then they later did it for Windows PCs. And so that's what Connectix worked on, an emulator to let computers play PlayStation games. In order to do that, though, they had to reverse engineer how the PlayStation worked. And that involved them using the BIOS files and other encrypted means, other circumvention techniques, files from a PS1 that they took, they copied, and they figured out how it ticked until they could sufficiently engineer their own stuff to circumvent the security measures that were in place. Now, they finished up their emulator in December of 98 and released it in January of 99, and just as soon as Sony found out, obviously, they came a-knockin', and not surprisingly, Nintendo and Sega obviously threw their monetary support behind Sony because all of them wanted to see the emulation stopped, and this seemed like a good case to stop it. And at the district court, Sony won against Connectix, but on appeal, the appeals court ruled in favor, and it never wound up going to the Supreme Court. So that winds up being the appeals court for that circuit winds up being the controlling legal case. And at the heart of the issue was about the copyrighted works, right? Because we are talking about the PlayStation and the code that they've put together. And the court decided that fair use ruled the day in the case of what the emulator does to a game console. And if you'll permit me some oversimplification,
Please.
They said that emulation itself is a type of fair use because they said it was transformative. Transformative in the sense that it allows you to play a game on a system that it was never intended for, and that in and of itself is a transformative act. They also said that reverse engineering was a type of fair use, as the act of deconstructing code is both an educational as well as developmental for the emulator. The reverse engineering helped them to build the emulator, and that was how they did it, and it was a fair use of that code, copied, stolen even, if you will, in order to be used. And they also said that, because PlayStation was just like, they're selling this, and they said that the sales of the emulator don't preclude a fair use defense to this case. You don't have to be doing something for free in order to still be fairly using copyrighted work. It doesn't count you out. And the distribution of copyrighted data, they did say, was a strict no-no. But the emulator didn't include that. So no worries. They made their own code by reverse engineering, and they did not distribute said code that had been copied and theirs. And just in closing on Sony v. Connectix, I want to quote the court on an important distinction that they made, because one of Sony's big claims in the case was monetary damages as a result of the emulation. And I'll quote, Sony understandably seeks control over the market for devices that play games Sony produces or licenses. Copyright law, however, does not confer such a monopoly. And that's where they put it to bed, was that, even though you might have an interest, you might want to do this, copyright law will never give you a monopoly in making it so that your games are played only on your console.
See, and that's an argument that can be broken down so easily.
I mean, maybe.
They're saying you don't have a right to a monopoly of where your stuff can be played, but yet there's console exclusives. So I feel like that argument gets broken down pretty quickly. But there's some valid points there.
I mean, all I'm saying is, that is what the court said in '99. It's the last actual court case, so it's the only precedent that we have. Some history for us.
Well, now it is time for Indie Game of the Week. I love this segment so much, where we talk about a game that may need more attention and tell you whether or not it deserves your attention. Now, this week, we're going back a little bit. We typically do newer stuff, but this game caught my eye because they have continued updating it over the past couple years, and they're about to make a sequel, and they had recently released some DLC at the time I reached out for codes. This week, let me post it in the chat, we are going to be talking about Grime. And Grime, ironically, is part of Metroidvania Fusion's sale on Steam right now, so you can get it for 40% off. Here's the description. Destroy, absorb, grow. Grime is a fast and unforgiving action-adventure RPG in which you crush your foes with living weapons that mutate form and function, and then consume their remains with a black hole to strengthen your vessel as you break apart a world of anatomical horror and intrigue. Mac, this one came out a while ago. It came out August 2nd, 2021. As I mentioned, it got my attention because of the updates that they've been doing and the sequel that is incoming. Developer is Cloverbyte. Publisher is Akupara Games. Currently at very positive on Steam with 3,405 reviews. So they're getting some attention. And like I said, it's currently $14.99 on Steam. But I still wanted to highlight this one. And Mac, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And then I have some strong thoughts on this game.
I do have something, and that is that Mac has never been good at timing. You're a stand-up. Yeah. You got timing on lockdown, and me, not so much. Not in any aspect of my life, much less the type that requires precision for things. So I found myself very much struggling in this because while you do eventually get the ability to sort of combat in a normal style, it is objectively the case that in Grime, it very much incentivizes, encourages, needs you perhaps even to absorb, which is essentially a sort of, basically a parrying mechanic.
Yeah, correct. It's a parry.
And bringing in their mass to be a part of yours increases things like the level up, also unlocks the various mutations that you can do to your form, improving the abilities. But I will say, in spite of my issues with being able to time things correctly, there is a delightful madcap, crazy darkness to the feel in Grime. Everything seems to be the products of a diseased mind.
Yep.
And if you enjoy that sort of weird, unsettling horror, my gosh, Grime has nailed the style.
Yeah. Now, as y'all know, I'm a sucker for Metroidvanias. I would agree with Mac. I don't necessarily like the timing aspect that's required. It took me a while to figure out, but once you figure it out, for me, it was a non-issue after the first couple hours of playing. So at that point, I was able to just enjoy the game. I would say one of the things that I really liked about this Metroidvania over others is that the boss fights were extremely challenging and that it felt more like an open world Metroidvania than others that I've played. Where some are like, okay, clearly I need to go get double jump in order to go to the next place. In this game, maybe it was just the way they had the map built, but it seemed like there were more paths to explore than there were with other Metroidvanias that I've played. And so I really enjoyed that. I liked the setting. I liked the depth of the visuals.
It has that sort of 3 point or 2.5D sort of stuff. Even though I didn't run into a time where we like pivoted around a corner and like went depthwards back.
No.
Okay. But it certainly has, multiple layers in the background to give that big sense of...
Yeah, and so I love that because it shows the attention to detail is more than just the gameplay. It's more than just the story. It's really focused on making it an immersive experience, and the lighting effects, the background, it's super cool. This is a game that I actually played while my wife and I were on our cruise. Every once in a while I'd have some downtime, and this is the game that I was going through. And I can't say enough good things about it. There was a certain level of imprecision. Is that a word?
I say it is.
In the controls. And it's almost like when you're playing a game and you feel like there's input lag. There were moments where I felt like that with this. And sometimes it was just because I was using a heavier weapon. Sometimes it was because I was trying to parry and absorb these enemies and it was frustrating. But I would say that this game had the right amount of challenge to make me feel like I was good at the game without making me want to throw a controller, as the kids would say. So I honestly, I wouldn't say this is a S tier Metroidvania, but I'd probably say it's like an A. I really, really enjoyed this game, and I couldn't put it down. I'm level 30 something right now, and I just think about some of the bosses that I beat, and I believe some of them were optional, which I think is always awesome in a Metroidvania when there's optional content. This game, like I said, I couldn't put it down, and I had a blast with it.
Man, I'll tell you what, Mr. Nice Guy, I hope I can get on your level of timing, because for me, I think the timing was so tough for me to get my head around that it detracted in ways that it didn't for you. But I am glad that you are succeeding where I am failing, because I felt like it really made it tough, and but I see what they're doing, and I appreciated it. I just wish that that not being good at the game wasn't such a thing. And maybe that's it. Maybe this roots all the way back to my feelings about easy mode, roots all the way back to being so trash at video games.
I was thinking that.
Maybe that's just me, but nonetheless, still a good game. I like the feeling of it. I just wish I was better at it.
And it was fun because it's definitely Steam Deck compatible. So was able to take it on the go, get in 20 minutes here, try to beat one of these bosses. When I got to the Two Sisters, which I don't know how far into the game you are, but the Two Sisters gave me so much trouble, that boss fight. And then there was a crab that was an optional boss that took me forever. And when I beat them, I just felt so accomplished. I really think they have something special here, and I'm looking forward to the sequel. So, Mac, moment of truth, what would you rate this game on the Two Nerds in a Pod
on the Two Nerds in a Pod scale, I'd say 3 of 5. I think it's good. I think, though, that the reliance on timing for parrying just made it way too much of a slog for me.
See, and I would have to disagree. I would give this one a 4 out of 5. I think, once again, they have something special here. There's a lot of Metroidvanias that kind of take like the Ori and the Will of the Wisp look, or that are trying to do what Hollow Knight did, or even just copying, straight up Metroid. This one does its own thing graphically. And I think it's a beautiful game. I think that if you like Metroidvanias and you like Souls-likes, this one is for you. So I give it a 4 out of 5. That has been our indie game of the week. Oh, and once again, shout out to the developers who provided us with this game, Cloverbyte and Akapura Games. Free codes do not affect our opinions, but we appreciate y'all. That's it, Mac.
All right. Well, let's turn our attention to a crowdfunding project that's trying to get off the ground. A game in waiting, if you will, with a little thing called Kick or Kickstart. Mr. Nice Guy, I have a link here to a crowdfunding project, and I'll drop it in the chat so that everybody who's here with us live can have a look for themselves. And let's talk about some of the virtues and maybe even the vices while we think about kicking it out of here or kickstarting it. This is Godshard Chronicles, a game with quite a, I don't know, lofty ambition from such a name. This is a game that should be giving you a sort of Secret of Mana vibe. That sort of style where you have a top or an overhead view, slightly isometric, with multiple pixel art characters moving around on the screen. It goes heavy in the JRPG vibes, complete with, as is being a part of this Kickstarter, animated JRPG style cutscenes, the type of things you might see in one of them Dragon Quest games, voice acting to go with as well. Now, they are looking for this game to provide two-player co-op.
Wow.
In the thing. Just sort of the same style that you would have had in, say, Secret of Mana. Now, in Secret of Mana, you would have 3 characters that you could swap between. You could even have other players come in and play the characters locally. This is going, while with just 2 players, going with that sort of thing, letting you swap between the 2 mains in order to play the game. And also, if you have somebody with another controller, to play it with you. This is something that certainly pleases me, because I would love to play some games with the nerd next door. Now, it is a $25 minimum buy-in for this game if you want a digital copy that's available, and the delivery estimate is December of 2026, which is a little bit longer than I think any of us would like to see a Kickstarter putting out there. But Mr. Nice Guy, as I've been vamping for time here and explaining to those people at home, any thoughts you have after having taken a look at it?
So it's interesting because I was thinking about this segment earlier today, and I was thinking, the past couple weeks, I feel like I have kicked the last few ones that we've done. And so I was thinking, I hope he brings a really good game this week. And in terms of what this looks like, it gives me Sea of Star vibes, which was one of my top 5 games of 2023. I like these styles of game. I like the idea of being able to do this 2-player co-op. And I wish that game makers would make a way that you can do 2-player co-op where your second player can hop in, online or in person without having to have been through the rest of the journey with you. Because as we get older, as we're in our 30s, and we have things to do, scheduling is the biggest enemy to fun, right? And so the idea of consistently meeting up with someone to finish a game, but then having to wait for them to be able to play, it's just not a fun idea to me.
Their intention is for this to be a essentially couch co-op thing, with just one screen, and player 2 can drop in or out anytime by connecting a second controller.
Sure.
So that doesn't really help in the sort of, like what you're saying, meeting up and getting somebody else in there. But in the situation where it's Mr. Nice Guy and Mrs. Nice Girl, she plops down, connects a controller, plays for a bit, and then it's just like, I gotta go, and then the AI will take over the other character while we're doing, just like in Secret of Mana.
So yeah, I mean, as far as the content here, I think this is going to be an awesome game. Just looking at it, and looking at the influences. I guess, Mac, as always, there's a couple things about this that frustrate me, and these are the same things that I've said before. Number one is the date being December of 2026. That's 2 years away. We just are at a point in gaming and in media consumption that nobody should have to put down money to wait for something that is 2 years out. We have no shortage of things to play now. And most people could just wait for this to come out and then buy it for $25 or whatever it's going to cost. The second thing is, Mac, the $50,000. I don't know how big this team is, but I have always been a believer that when you're an entrepreneur, you should pay yourself. And if there's a team of people and the goal of this is $50,000, they're not going to have enough to pay themselves until December of 2026. Unless this is really just a side hustle and they all have day jobs elsewhere. That's really it.
Going with that, of course, that I have a big need for a playable demo. And for a game that says that it's very far along, especially we should be able to not just see, but try some of this out for ourselves. And sadly, there is no playable demo involved, which for me makes it a kick as opposed to a kickstart for those reasons. Now, on the plus side, I will throw this out there. Even though it's a kick for you, it's a kick for me, they do say near the end that they have the money to finish the game. And that this Kickstarter is mostly for them to add on things like animated cutscenes and voice acting and such. And while I wish them the best, I like the idea, I like what's going on, I think if you really had been working on this, to the point that you've got these things in place, like they claim, then there shouldn't be a problem presenting a playable demo for those of us who want to try it out. Especially when people are like, oh, we've been working on this for years. I'm like, maybe show me. Show, don't tell, my dudes. Show, don't tell.
The one thing I will say is they've already raised the $50,000. They're at about $56,000, and they still have 28 days left to go. So, if the issue was going to be paying your talent, paying your workers, maybe they make a couple $100,000. Even then, I'm looking at this team of 10 people or however many it is. I don't think you can pay people for 2 years. Unless it's like a flat rate thing.
Yeah. Now, obviously, we wish everybody the best. We wish JCat Games Limited the best here as they're trying to complete this project and make it happen. We like the idea. We just, not overly thrilled with the implementation. But I do see myself dropping the money on this on full release when it comes out. If it comes out in December 2026, then I look forward to seeing them then. But sorry, it's a kick for us this time.
It is time for Nerd Flex.
Woo-hoo.
A segment where you, the viewers, try to stump the hosts. Sometimes you do, sometimes you do not. Mac,
yes,
we have some test bank questions.
We do, but we also, Mr. Nice Guy, have a sound test to turn it around on our listeners. You guys come almost all the time with your awesome, nerdy questions trying to stump us. Well, it's our turn to stump you. The Uno reverse card of this segment. So, listen closely because I've got a sound from somewhere, someone, somehow in video games. If you're the first one to correctly identify it and let us know, either on social media or let us know direct with your guesses, you could have a present handcrafted by me and sent to you.
That's awesome.
So listen up.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, good luck. And now let's turn it back over to our adoring public who shall now stump us with questions, and barring that, a test bank.
Here we go. Ooh, this is a good question that I don't know the answer to. It's a Sega question, Mac. What Nintendo franchise has Nintendo published on a Sega console?
I mean, my first inclination, knee-jerk, Mega Man. I was just like, well, but Mega Man's Capcom, not Nintendo.
Yeah, it implies that it's almost like an exclusive.
Yeah,
and I know that it's got to be something that doesn't involve Mario because we know Mario doesn't really make it other places, so that eliminates a lot.
Yeah,
it's not.
I can't think of a Donkey Kong. I don't think,
or a Zelda, or a Kirby.
You think it's something like super obscure, like one of those fifth string Nintendo franchises?
I mean, it's got to be. I legitimately don't know. Like maybe like a Kid Icarus or something.
I'd be inclined to just go with Kid Icarus.
I'll go Kid Icarus. Let's see what the answer is, or we'll be here all day.
Yeah, Kid Icarus sounds great.
Wow, dude, this is interesting. The answer is Pokemon on the Sega Pico.
Interesting. If I remember right, the Sega Pico was like one of those like personal, like almost personal computer type things. I might be thinking about something completely different, but yeah, no, never would have guessed, not in a million years.
Yeah, I legitimately had no idea.
Well, we do have a question in the chat from Ishmael, if we'd like.
Go for it.
Ishmael asks, In the 1990 video game masterpiece, Warlords, what was the name of the Dwarven realm? Was it A, the Grey Dwarves, B, the Dwarves of Trongenheim, C, Svigerheim, or D, Hill Dwarf Fiefdoms? I'm afraid that I am struggling. I lean towards C, Svigerheim, but
What was it on? What console?
it was on PC. Yeah, it was very much like a 4X sort of move around, conquer, reassess and respec kingdoms and keep on going to conquer the world.
Okay.
You had like knights and sort of hero units as well in it. It was definitely an interesting game.
Well, I have no idea. So, like, I don't even think we can logically work our way through this one.
I'm just gonna, by guess and by golly, go for C, Svigerheim.
You know, C is always a good answer when you're dealing with multiple choice and you're not sure.
I'm prepared to be wrong. The answer is A, the Grey Dwarves, who controlled the central area of the Kingdom of Illyria, at least at the beginning of each level. It's been too long.
Well, Mac, last question.
That's 0 for 2.
Last question of the day. This is from the test bank. It is a Nintendo question. What color is the death mushroom in Super Mario Brothers: The Lost Levels?
I think purple?
I think purple too, but I think it might be multicolored, so I hope they're not trying to trick us.
I hope not. My heart can't take
I'm
a
pretty
trick
sure
like
it's
this.
purple. Just having played Lost Levels on Super Mario All-Stars as a kid, a decent amount, I am pretty sure it is purple. So we'll go purple, final answer.
Let's do it.
Hey, we got one. That was an easy one. It is indeed purple.
Yes.
And that has been Nerdflex.
Awesome. Well, now we turn to a little bit of legalese.
Legalese.
I had a whole bunch of stuff ready to talk about the Nintendo v Tropic Haze. In a lot of ways, it's kind of moot. I'm more interested to hear, if you want to know anything about it, what do you want to know about the Nintendo v Yuzu? Because I can talk about, like, what they said, that 62 pages that they wrote down, because I read through that and took notes. But, like, what do you want to talk about with respect to it?
No, dude, like, I want to hear what you came up with, and then I'll give my opinion.
Okay.
But I think also for context, we should give the viewers and the listeners who may not know what happened, like, a rundown. So that's why I wanted you to...
Would you be willing to give us the sad news or the rundown as you see it, my dude?
So this is on PCGamer.com. Switch emulator Yuzu is dead. Abruptly settles lawsuit with Nintendo for $2.4 million in an enormous blow to console emulation. This is by Wes Fenlon, and here is what he writes. Last week, Nintendo filed a lawsuit against Switch emulator Yuzu, blaming the emulator for the mass piracy of 2023's The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and declaring, quote, there is no lawful way to use Yuzu to play Nintendo Switch games. The developers of Yuzu hired a lawyer, seemingly setting up a suit for the first legal showdown over emulation in more than 20 years. But today, Yuzu and Nintendo filed a surprise joint motion to settle the suit, with Yuzu developers paying Nintendo monetary relief in the sum of $2.4 million. Now, Mac, I had sent you an article, and one thing that I thought was interesting in the article is that the creators of Yuzu not only settled with Nintendo, but they also released a statement.
I have it if you'd like.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
We write today to inform you that Yuzu and Yuzu's support of Citra, that's the emulator that was for Nintendo DS, right?
3DS, correct.
3DS, yeah, are being discontinued effective immediately. Yuzu and its team have always been against piracy. We started the projects in good faith out of passion for Nintendo and its consoles and games, and we're not intending to cause harm. But we see now that because our projects can circumvent Nintendo's technological protection measures and allow users to play games outside of authorized hardware, they have led to extensive piracy. In particular, we have been deeply disappointed when users have used our software to leak game content prior to its release and ruin the experience for legitimate purchasers and fans. We have come to the decision that we cannot continue to allow this to occur. Piracy was never our intention, and we believe that piracy of video games and on video game consoles should end. Effective today, we will be pulling our code repositories offline, discontinuing our Patreon accounts and Discord servers, and soon shutting down our websites. We hope our actions will be a small step toward ending piracy of all creators' works. Thank you for your years of support and for understanding our decision.
Yeah, so to me, that's a bunch of BS. Nintendo not only made them pay, but they also made them release a statement.
You mean to tell me that you think that heartwarming statement sounded like it was under duress, Mr. Nice Guy?
I mean, you make an emulator and you work on it and uphold it for years and years and years, and then you're like, you know what? We hated when people would use it for the thing it was created for. And not that it was created for piracy, but they knew that people were using it for that. I mean, let's just be honest here, right? For game preservation via piracy or just for straight up piracy. They knew that people were using it for that. Just like how gun makers know that sometimes people use their guns to commit crimes. That's not what they're intended for, but they know that it happens and they can't pretend that it doesn't. And so it's very clear that Nintendo said, in addition to paying us $2.4 million, which to you is a lot of money, but to us, Nintendo is not a lot of money, we want you to release this statement to scare others into not doing this. And Mac, one thing I want to point out, and then I really want to hear your thoughts, maybe from a legal perspective, maybe just as a gamer, is Nintendo had previously said, or part of the suit said, that over 1 million illegal copies of Tears of the Kingdom were downloaded. You know, to get 2.4 million as a result of this suit means that they got $2.4 per game. And I actually looked it up because I was curious. And generally speaking, Nintendo makes 30 to 40% profit on Switch games. And so it would have been more than $2.4 per game, which just goes to show this was never about the money.
It's hard for me to really be objective when I feel like somebody is being dishonest. Kind of like, you know, when they're like coming in here saying, you owe us all this money, but we will settle in days for 2.5 million. Just like you said, Mr. Nice Guy, it was never about the supposed damages, which I think is worth drilling down to on another time. I just want to say generally, when I read a lawsuit and I ask myself, is this serious? I usually look for three things. I look for, did they ask for something that the court can actually grant? And, you know, we talked about this like several times ago. I'm like, you know, if somebody says in a custody battle, you know, the court should have us do trial by combat, that's not a serious ask, and we should laugh that man out of court. You know, is the request for relief reasonable is always something worth looking for. And good news is that's always at the very end of a lawsuit, so you can skip straight to the end, read it, and then just be done. Sometimes if people ask for craziness. The second thing I'm always looking for is, like, when claims are made, do they have evidence attached? Like, do they have exhibits that they've attached? Sworn affidavits are also good. That's when somebody is just, like, willing to write down, under penalty of perjury, these things are true, I saw them, we have good things like that.
Right.
And so, you know, that makes things stronger. And the third thing I tend to look at is when claim is made with reference to law. So, like, specific citations of a specific law, specific footnotes saying, oh, this case, U.S. v. Harper, this v. this, you know, all those sorts of things. In general, Nintendo's suit kind of failed in all the three things that I normally look for a serious suit. Not to say that they weren't seriously serious, but, like, you know, it was more performance theater than it was anything else. Great example, right? What they asked for in damages in the suit was $2,500 for every circumvention and $150,000 for every violation of copyright. And in the suit, they defined the violation as every one of those 1 million people who downloaded Tears of the Kingdom. So for those of you playing the home game, which I call Calculator, that would be $2.5 billion that Nintendo claimed they were damaged by Yuzu, which would have been half the profits they pulled in 2023. And I think it's worth asking, do you think it's possible that they had $2.5 billion in damages from the Yuzu emulator, specifically from the 2 weeks of Tears of the Kingdom pirated things, I think that seems over the top, and I think it's even more over the top in the context of like what you said, Mr. Nice Guy, of them immediately settling for $2.5 million.
I think it was 2.4, just for those fact checking us. But the other thing, and I don't know if you read this when you read the statement, is they did say they were taking down their Patreon as well, the Yuzu creators.
They did, yes.
So like Nintendo didn't just want to stop this from happening; they wanted to bury these people. And
Yes.
I'm not going to sit here and say that Nintendo is 100% wrong for not wanting people to be able to pirate their games in this way. Because once again, you know, we say guns don't kill people, people kill people. But people are legitimately using guns to go and commit crimes. And so there has to be some level of onus on the creators of Yuzu, because they knew full well that people would use it for piracy. Like, we talk about game preservation, but we can't pretend like they didn't know people were going to do that, just like we can't pretend that gun makers don't know that people are going to use guns to walk into schools and to walk into banks and to do deplorable things. We know that they're going to use this tool for something evil in some cases. And something that's illegal. And so I can't help but think that the people who use Yuzu or who created Yuzu also knew that people would use it to do something illegal and just said, hey, it's not my fault.
I hear what you're saying, although I do think that the balance of harms is so much higher in the case of what you can do with a gun versus the failure to capture an additional dollar from the emulation side.
I'm not comparing lives to video games. Don't misinterpret. I'm just using an analogy.
Apologies. The analogy, I think you're right to say that these people, Yuzu 100% knew that this were the types of things that the Yuzu emulator could be used for, and that they did carry on in spite of that. I don't know how compelled I am by that component. Particularly because I feel like Nintendo always comes to us with such unclean hands with respect to emulation, that they've gone out of their way as much as they can to, even when they didn't have, the old video games available previously, and they went out of their way to try and shut down emulators for games that nobody could buy. That I just have a bad taste in my mouth generally for them when they start shaking their fingers at other people.
Go ahead.
I do just want to interject on the subject of the million copies that Nintendo claims that they know. One of the things I said I'm always looking for is if you actually have evidence to back up things. Nintendo's evidence for 1 million copies downloaded, they said we're keeping track of it, but they had nothing that they actually referenced to, no sworn affidavits or evidence that they attached. They just said, trust us, it was downloaded 1 million times and attempted 1 million more. And this is one that I want to throw out there from the suit real quick. They said every copy in circulation was undoubtedly a pirated copy, and every user who possessed a copy had not lawfully purchased the game. But do you think we could find one person who downloaded that pirated copy who had also pre-ordered Tears of the Kingdom, keeping in mind that Tears of the Kingdom pre-orders started 4 months before release?
Pre-ordered? Sure.
Do you think we could find two?
I do, and I also think that we could find two who pre-ordered and then canceled their pre-order as a result of downloading.
And these are the type...
If we're going to be objective.
Yeah, if we're going to be objective, we could probably find that. We could also definitely, though, if we could find a single person who pre-ordered the game, wanted to get at it early, played at Tears of the Kingdom on the Yuzu emulator, if we could find even a few, we, of course, would have to take issue with, their characterization that every copy, every person had not lawfully purchased the game because, they had pre-orders open for 4 months.
I strongly disagree with you because we preach and we preach and we preach and we preach that video games are art and that they're meant to be enjoyed. And so if people get the game in advance of the release date and it gets leaked and it results in you or me or someone else finding out the end to a game before it was meant to be known and before it can be fully enjoyed, just like happened with The Last of Us Part 2, then to me there's some damages there. And it's hard to quantify it from a monetary perspective. But knowing that Joel was going to die in The Last of Us Part 2...
Spoilers, Lom!
Spoilers. Knowing that was going to happen a month or 2 months or however soon it was before the game released is a big deal, and it ruins the art. And so for Nintendo, they're dealing with that. They're dealing with that because The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom was leaked before it released. And people who were excited for it potentially stumbled across parts of the story before it came out. And I do think that there's room for damages there. Not from a loss of revenue from people not purchasing the game or canceling a pre-order, but from the art being ruined.
That's a good thing to bring up. I don't know how you could ever make that happen within the legal system that we have.
It's unfortunate. Well, that's been legalese. It's a whole podcast episode right there. Emulation.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
Well, cool. Let's keep it moving. That has been our show. Ladies and gentlemen, episode 299 is a wrap up. Before we go, we have one last segment called What We've Been Watching and What We've Been Playing, where we talk about just that. Mac, what you been into, man?
I've mostly been playing an oldie but a goodie, Chasm, for some reasons that I can't talk about right now.
Oh, snap. I think I could guess, but I won't spoil it.
But also, of course, been playing Grime. And as for watching, I've mostly been watching some old... There was this old actor, his name's Tony Curtis. I think he's most commonly known for a movie with Jack Lemmon and Marilyn Monroe called Some Like It Hot.
Nice.
We've been watching like old Tony Curtis movies, like The Purple Mask, and anyway, it's been a weird rabbit hole, but a fun trip for what we've been watching. What about you, Mr. Nice Guy?
Nice. Well, I've been playing a lot of Helldivers 2, and let me tell you, it might be the game of the year. It's only March, and that game is fire. It's an extraction shooter. You squad up with your friends. You have some laughs. You kill bugs. You kill robots. You extract. You do side quests. It kind of has a Monster Hunter vibe in that you go on a planet. You have 40 minutes to do the quest and any side quests, and then you got to go exfil. Played it Saturday night with Uncle Ruckus and Salty Walters, another friend of the show, and played it with my neighbor up the street quite a bit as well. And just been having a really, really good time. Like, you upgrade your gear, you upgrade your ship. It's a third-person shooter, kind of has some Destiny 2 vibes, and it's just a ton of fun, even when you're getting killed. And there's friendly fire, Mac.
Ooh.
So, as you can imagine, that makes for some interesting times. But, that's the thing I've been playing most, and then a couple retro games, working on Wario Land on my Analog Pocket. Oh, and as far as shows, I got to say, watching this cool show called The Floor that Rob Lowe hosts. And my kids love it. My wife loves it. We're all having a good time. Trivia show. Too complicated to explain with the time we have. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to episode 299 of Two Nerds in a Pod. Next week, episode 300. So exciting. Hey, be excellent to each other. Keep gaming. Remember that it's art. And we'll see you next time. Deuces.
Bye.